Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Honest About the Irish, brought to you by yours truly, B-Man is Mad. I hope you guys are enjoying your Wednesday evening, and I am, I'm a little annoyed about something, I'm a little irritated about something that I've been keeping inside, something that I bottled up inside, my emotions about the Notre Dame haters and the Notre Dame naysayers, and that is, I knew this was going to happen. I knew that these Notre Dame haters were going to contradict themselves. I knew that they were going to find a way to pick at Notre Dame and find a way to hate them because being a Notre Dame fan is very difficult. And I will start that off right away because I don't like the whole thing from you guys, so I'm going to speak true from the heart here and true from my raw emotions. And is that Notre Dame has clinched an ACC berth against most likely Clemson in the ACC championship game, and that game is in a couple of weeks on December 19th on ABC at 2 o'clock, I believe my time, Central Time, 3 o'clock Eastern. I couldn't be mistaken. But I'm not going to get into logistics. I'm not going to get into the facts and all that. If you want to get into the facts about that regarding why Notre Dame's not playing Wake Forest, they don't really want to have a 3-game race in the ACC championship game. They just want to crown it to Notre Dame and most likely Clemson. But if you don't believe me, then go Google it, because I've been Google fact on here a lot by the people that know about Notre Dame more than me. But there's something in common with me and those people, is that we both didn't go to Notre Dame, and we both have iPhones, and we both use Google. But that's not the point today, folks. What's really bothering me and what is really irritating me is, what was the number one knock on Notre Dame? What did you always hear? What was the most annoying thing that I had to deal with? With the arrogant 1980 graduate alumni prick from the University of Michigan. Well, Notre Dame is an independent. Notre Dame shouldn't have a right to jump over someone who's won a conference championship, even if Notre Dame is undefeated, and play in the BCS championship game, or even play in the college football format, like they did in 2018 against Clemson when they got blown out, and everyone knew that Notre Dame was going to get blown out. Notre Dame, being an independent, does not deserve to be there. They don't play anyone. They have a soft schedule. They play the same teams every year with USC, Purdue, Michigan, Michigan State, and other teams. Then 2020 came, an unprecedented year, a terrible year. 2020 is going to be one of those years that we're always going to remember in every facts of life, because it affected everyone's life, no matter what. If you're into sports, you're not into sports, at work, everywhere, personal life, family member. You knew someone who had COVID-19. You just knew someone who had it. You saw it every day in the news, especially with the election. 2020 was just an ugly, nasty year. But because of COVID-19, Notre Dame had to join a conference, and they did join the ACC that's in a couple of weeks. They haven't joined it yet. They will be there in a couple of weeks, most likely against Clemson. I'm getting ahead of myself here, folks. I'm getting too excited because I'm a little irritated right now, and I'm just a little annoyed. So since Notre Dame has joined a conference, they have gone 9-0. They have beaten Clemson, yes, I know. They did not beat Clemson with Trevor Lawrence. They beat Clemson with their backup quarterback, by the way, who was still the number one team at that time. Even though Clemson had injuries, yes, I understand that, but they were still the number one team. I'm getting tired of saying this. I feel like I'm beating a dead horse, but Notre Dame beat the number one team. Notre Dame supposedly beat an elite team. I hate using that word, elite. But you know what? It didn't satisfy the Notre Dame haters, because now they're saying the same thing that they said when they were an independent. Well, Notre Dame hasn't played anybody. The only reason why they beat Clemson is because they had injuries. Their secondary gave up 400 yards to the backup quarterback. You can never make them happy. And listen, what do you think Trevor Lawrence would do against Notre Dame? Do you think he would throw over 500 yards against Notre Dame? It wouldn't really matter. Another 50 yards wouldn't have made that big of a difference because Notre Dame beat Clemson. Now, I'm taking a little bit of a reach here. I'm sticking my neck out a little bit. I'm kind of defying my channel a little bit. I don't want to sound like a Notre Dame delusionist, but Notre Dame deserves credit where it's deserved and where it's due, and that is that Notre Dame has taken down the number one team in the country, and Notre Dame is at top right now of the mountain in the ACC. Now, if Notre Dame does beat Clemson twice with Trevor Lawrence, God forbid there is no more COVID-19 breakouts in the next 2 weeks, and that both teams are 100% healthy going into that game, then Notre Dame should be the undisputed, non-argued number one team in the country, being that they've beaten Clemson at home, number one, and then beating them again on a neutral site at the ACC championship game, the first championship game that Notre Dame's been in terms of a conference, and actually being the first time they've been in a conference, period, and it beat them with their heavyweight quarterback, Trevor Lawrence. then the argument should be over. But you know what? There's still going to be naysayers out there. There's still going to be negativity out there. And there's still going to be arrogant people out there that hate Notre Dame because they're just Notre Dame. And you're going to have that. And it's unfortunate. And I sit here annoyed by it because you can't make miserable people happy. You can't make those people happy. I've tried to make miserable people happy. You've been in relationships before. You women out there who are listening to this, you've been with a boyfriend who's been miserable. You men out there, you've been with a girlfriend who's miserable, and you cannot stand being around that people. And you try to make them happy. You spend all your energy, all your love, all your affection on them, and it doesn't work. And what do? You just cut ties with those people. I try to stay away from negativity with these people on the social media because I get fired up. I don't usually fire back at them because what's the point? I am not a Facebook bully. I don't hide behind a keyboard and pretend I'm better than someone. But I go to these sites to see what people are saying about Notre Dame. And as predicted, like I said earlier in this podcast, and I've said all year, well, Notre Dame hasn't played anybody. And like I said, the whole thing about Trevor Lawrence, well, they didn't play against Trevor Lawrence and they had injuries. I don't engage with these people. I don't want to argue with them. It is very frustrating because no matter what Notre Dame does, they will never get the love that they deserve. And yes, this year they do, because this year it just feels different. It feels different because, yes, they're in a conference. But this coach, Brian Kelly, has done, and I hate to say this because I always criticize Brian Kelly. Brian Kelly has done a great job keeping this team together, keeping this team mature. I never thought that I would see a quarterback this developed under Brian Kelly that Ian Book has been this year. And I am proud of Brian Kelly. Now listen, Notre Dame falls flat on their face this weekend against Syracuse, and they look like crap. I'll be on here screaming at Brian Kelly again, screaming at Ian Book again, because I'm an up and down, nut job Notre Dame fan, and I'm a little crazy. That being said, I give Brian Kelly and I give Notre Dame a lot of credit this year. All the pressure that they had, the whole COVID-19 breakout in the second game of the year against Wake Forest. It looked like doom and gloom against Louisville. I was a little negative on there, but Notre Dame has just gotten better every week, and they've proven me wrong every week. And here they are going to play in the ACC championship game. And if they beat Clemson twice, dream scenario, of course, which I don't think is going to happen, beating a team twice in college football is very difficult, especially when you have your heavyweight leader coming back with Clemson, and that is Trevor Lawrence. I don't see Notre Dame beating them twice, but if they do, this is going to be a special year for Notre Dame, because I told you before my dream scenario that if Notre Dame does beat Clemson twice, go into, this is what I want, this is what Uncle B-Man wants, this is what the crazy B-Man Notre Dame nut job fan wants. And no, I'm not being delusional here, because there's a difference, and I will get into that later. But, however, my dream scenario, of course, beating Clemson twice, beating up on Ohio State. By the way, speaking of Ohio State, they never play anybody, but you don't ever hear about that. And then go to the national championship game and beat Alabama and avenge their 2012 blowout against the Crimson Tide, which left me almost crying because I thought that was the end of Notre Dame being close to a national championship game. I thought that was Notre Dame's last hurrah, being a national championship team after the way they got decimated and destroyed by Alabama. Now, you might think I'm being a little delusional here. No, there's a difference between delusional and being hopeful. That is a hopeful pipe dream that I know that's not going to happen. Most likely Notre Dame will lose to Clemson and they will still play in the college football playoff format no matter what. They're still going to get there. Now, will they play Clemson 3 times? The only way I can see them playing Clemson 3 times is if Notre Dame does lose to Clemson in the AC Championship game in a couple weeks here, and then Notre Dame would have to play them again. And I don't think it'd be like that. It would have to, it would have to be the national championship game. I don't think they would set them up for a second straight game. So we'll just have to see. But let's take one game at a time. Of course, Notre Dame this weekend does play against Clemson. That game is on at 1:30 Central Time on NBC. It's the last regular season game of the year. Then, of course, the exciting AC Championship game will be 2 weeks after that on December 19th. And I'm very excited. I cannot wait. I love college football. This is the best time of the year. And then Notre Dame will most likely be off for almost a month. And just hopefully, after the ACC title game, Notre Dame and Brian Kelly will prepare better, depending on who they play in the college football format, depending on what seed they are, if they beat Clemson or if not. Hopefully, Brian Kelly and Ian Book are better prepared, and I really think Brian Kelly has learned a lot of things being there 11 years. It took him a while. He's developed. He's evolved. But this year just feels different, and I would just love to see them beat Alabama and Ohio State twice after beating Clemson twice. That is B-Man's absolute pipe dream, folks. And I don't want to beat a dead horse here, and I don't want to repeat myself 100 times, but that would be absolutely beautiful. It would make me happy. It would end the 2020 sports year on a fantastic high, because 2020 has been an awful year. It's been a terrible year, and I cannot stand it. It's one year that we all want to forget. But if you're a sports fan and you love college football and you love Notre Dame, then you're going to remember this year if that dream scenario happens. But like I said, let's take one game at a time. And make sure you hit that like button, folks. And make sure you hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment. I'd really appreciate it. What did we talk about today? What did we learn? We talked about that B-Man's very annoyed with Notre Dame haters, that they cannot make up their mind and they contradict themselves. And we also talked about B-Man's dream scenario, that you all probably think I'm delusional. And you all probably think that I'm contradicting myself on this channel because I go after Notre Dame delusionists who say they went there and they actually didn't. And they have their phone next to them. And they always Google Notre Dame facts in front of you to prove you right, prove you wrong, even though they're wrong and I'm right because I'm B-Man and they're not. So that's it, folks. Enjoy the rest of your week. It is Wednesday. It's almost Thursday. We're over the hill. Before you know it, it'll be Friday. Before you know it, it'll be Notre Dame football. And before you know it, B-Man will be on Saturday after the Syracuse game talking about the game and breaking down his opinion, his facts, and his emotions. Everyone, have a good night. Stay safe and go Irish.